Hey everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel, The Fasting Pharmacist. Today, I have been asked by more than one person to talk about bariatric surgery, also known as gastric bypass surgery. And today, I want to just start out with a disclaimer. This is not a substitute for medical advice. This is just me doing my own research to look at the pros and cons of bariatric surgery, also known as gastric sleeve or gastric bypass. I'd like to just talk to you a little bit today about what I've learned, and I do want to share that I was considering getting this surgery. I wanted for years to get this surgery. I think my doctor kind of laughed it off and didn't take me seriously because I think he said, well, you're not overweight enough, just diet and exercise. So for those of you who are like me and get blown off by your doctor who thinks, you don't need to worry about this because you're not 500 pounds. What about those people that maybe are only 100 pounds overweight or only 200 pounds? I mean, there shouldn't be an only ever used. But let's talk about gastric bypass and the pros and cons. I've made some visuals here. So what is a gastric sleeve? People say, oh, I've heard of it, but what is it? Gastric sleeve is where I looked at a case named Chloe. She was about 314 pounds. And what she had is when a vertical sleeve gastrectomy is when 80% is removed. Now, I tried to draw a little picture here of this whole entire thing being the stomach. This whole thing. She had about 20% remaining, which becomes this little sleeve, almost like a sleeve of a shirt. This entire bottom portion of her stomach that was all this one piece, that 80% is cut off. That's gone. And that is the vertical sleeve gastrectomy, VSG, okay? So when people say, oh, I'm having the sleeve, they just got this entire stomach cut down to this is all gone. So what starts out for most people, and often sadly it's teens, at least in the United States, people are talking about their social and psychological pressures and their poor quality of life. They start to feel terrible and they decide they want to do something about it, and they've got to be ready to change their life. So what happens is they have to go through a team of dietitians, doctors, and nurses. And what most people don't know is that you have a lot of work and you have to wait about 6 to 8 months. Once your insurance company approves this surgery, you have to wait 6 to 8 months of education, support groups, and being followed by a lot of doctors, dietitians, clinicians, and nurses. Everybody in a team, which costs a lot of money. You have to be followed, you have to be educated, or it's not going to work. So at their info meeting, they talk about how hard will the work be. You go through 6 to 8 months of preparing just for the surgery, just for learning what's going to happen. Then you go and meet with your doctors, a team. You get psychological counseling and education, and good for them. They should teach you these things. Training to deal with your recovery. Now, the actual surgery itself, once you wait 8 months and once you've done everything you need to do, once you get there, the actual surgery nowadays are using robots. So a little surgeon's in a little booth and he's putting his hands in his sleeve and he's dictating where all these things are going inside your body. There's a bunch of other people in the operating room, but it's in total, about 2 to 3 hours long using robots. So that's just some ins and outs of what the surgery's like. Now, let's talk about after surgery for the gastric sleeve. It's way harder than she thought. I talked about some of the comments she said it is really rough because people are elated. They're on cloud nine. They think, oh, this is going to be it for me. I'm going to get my gastric bypass surgery and my whole life's going to change and I'll finally get to do the things I want to do. But they have to know about the commitment it takes to change your entire life. She said in the first 3 days, you're inpatient, you're in the hospital, and you do have this fear of being released because what if something happens once you're out of the hospital and you're not going to know how to handle it? She first says the first 4 weeks were absolutely brutal. She says you cannot eat what you want, and you start craving bad food, and you start craving foods that you never even cared about. So somebody like me, for example, you can ask my family, I don't go out and buy fried chicken. I never buy fried foods. I never ever purchase them. I don't have anything in my house that makes fried foods. I'm still as fat as I am, and I don't even buy fried foods. She said that's what you start to crave, is you crave bad foods and you crave foods that you would never eat before, but you just start to crave. And you just can't have it. They will tell you no sweets, no fats, no sugar. They give you all of these rules, and some people do not follow the rules. The first weeks are the worst. She said you are healing your incisions and it's physically so painful. And as she said, there's something called dumping. If you eat too much, you will do what's called dumping and you are in excruciating pain because you screwed up. You can have small stacks. She would bring like a little protein drink or shakes at school because this was a teen that was still in school that went through this at 331 pounds. She started to increase her walking. They start you right away walking in the hospital. You've got to get up and moving to begin the healing process. If you don't do that, you're going to be in big trouble. You've got to get up and walking. She then increased her walks to 2 miles a day, and now she's down about 70 pounds after 4 months. So I want you guys to think about all the things you've had to go through just for 70 pounds. Now, let's just talk about in general bariatric surgery. It's usually about only 80 pounds in 7 months. There's going to be somebody out there who says, well, I've lost more than 80 pounds. There's always an exception to every rule. There's 2 sides to every story, and there's always somebody outside the bell curve. 80 pounds in 7 months. They get you walking right away. It's how you heal. You have to be in. It's mandatory. You've got to attend support groups. For example, I looked at a support group. It was just, okay, today we're going to talk about hydration. You know, they have a support group with a dietitian up there talking to you, and it's a room full of other gastric bypass people. It is mandatory. Also, protein. They really get into having protein, and the vitamins are important in supplements. She said at the end of it, she would redo it. It's a blessing and miracle, and she would do it again tomorrow. I saw 2 stories that they said they would do it again. Now let's talk about complications. These people that are saying I do it again tomorrow and it's a blessing, and there's things with a lap band called slipping, erosions, heartburn, and excruciating pain. 25% of all people have got to have a second operation to repair what went wrong. Erosions, if you can think about something being eroded, like think about when the ocean has a mountain and the water just keeps splashing and it becomes eroded down to nothing. Some of the gastric juices in your body that come up and erode your intestines, and that's just like pure acid eroding. 25% of all people is going to need a second operation. Your vitamin and mineral malabsorption, that means because you're not really eating, you just don't get the same amount of nutrients. Also, there's a risk of something called bowel obstruction, which you basically have a blockage in your intestinal tract of what is left, and that alone can kill you. There's also something called, I'm a pharmacist, there's a unit called NPO, nothing per oral or nothing by mouth, where people have to be on completely just IV nutrition. This means they are in a hospital bed, they're on an IV, they can only take saline, which is salt water, or they can take dextrose, or they can take what's called IV nutrition, where everything they eat is in what's called a TPN, total parenteral nutrition. Pharmacists make this, and that's all they can have. They can't put a single thing in their mouth because something has gone so wrong. And I'm not here to scare people. I just want people to know it's not just all fun and games, okay? Risk of bowel obstruction. It says here in diabetics, they see almost complete resolutions of all their symptoms. But I say, even if you lost your weight without the surgery as a diabetic, you also will see a resolution of all diabetic symptoms. 80% of people go off all their meds. They don't use any more insulin. They don't use any more pills. They completely are reversing diabetes. But this can happen from fasting, other weight loss methods like intermittent fasting, other ways to lose weight besides surgery. You can resolve all of your diabetic symptoms. There's something called dumping syndrome, and that is, again, where I talked about earlier, where you have an excruciating pain because you've eaten something that you shouldn't, and now you are in big trouble. It's very, very painful. 50% of people will regain their weight, and the average person with bariatric surgery or weight loss surgery loses about 70 pounds. On the weight loss journey I'm in right now, through using intermittent fasting, prolonged fasting, the snake diet, and 1 meal a day, which is a form of intermittent fasting, I lost about 50 pounds. So to go through all of this and risk death for 70 pounds, you need to think about whether it's worth it. Here's another thing I wrote down. So another story I watched was gastric bypass. A lady had 330 pounds. By doing the surgery, it decreased the amount eaten, the length of the intestines where food could be absorbed, pros and cons. She had to make a radical change in her exercise and a radical change in her eating. Is that a pro or is that a con? To make a radical change in your exercise or a radical change in your eating and your lifestyle. That could be looked as a positive either way. She had to make radical changes to her eating, newly sensitive digestive tract. She became lactose intolerant. Do you really want to never have ice cream again because you can't take lactose? Her body changed. Supplements became a must. She had to spend a lot of money and a lot of time taking supplements, vitamins, and that's a multi-billion-dollar industry. And then I did another drawing here. The Mayo Clinic did what's called a Roux-en-Y gastric bypass. So here's the scissors. They take the very bottom of your esophagus, entering into your stomach. And their stomach, especially on stretched out people, their stomach is all the way through this whole area. And they're cutting it right there at the top. They're bypassing intestine from over here. And they're reattaching this piece of intestine that came up to this cut. All the rest of this, it's bypassed. That's why they call it that. So the next thing I want to talk about is I went in and looked at not only what the doctors are saying. So they have a group of doctors and surgeons and people trying to sell you the surgery. I like to look at both sides of the story. As pharmacists, we're trained to look at studies for the pro and the con side of a situation and then talk about making your own decision. And I do that a lot with a lot of things. And what I love to do, especially on YouTube, is look at people's comments. Because when the doctor or the expert's up there talking, then people say, wait a minute, this is what happened to me. So I'm going to read you a story on a comment from somebody's video. It says, I had gastric sleeve surgery in September. I was 379 pounds. I had gotten down to 319 pounds before my surgery. After surgery, I was all the way down to 202 pounds, which is higher than me right now. But I have gotten back to some of my old habits and I have gained weight back. And I'm up around 240 pounds now. Part of the problem I had was that I had a bad back and I had to have surgery again. So I had been unable to exercise as much as I want. Since my back surgery, I have been having some terrible back pain. It's mostly muscle spasms. Yes, at times they were painful. But the problems I have experienced since my surgery, she says, number one, I got hungry sooner than I expected. Number two, some people have said they lose a taste for certain foods or after surgery. She says, as for me, that did not happen. She did not lose her hunger. She did not lose her cravings or a taste for something. Three, she says, I also had some regret immediately after surgery. She says, while I was in the hospital, I experienced some vomiting of blood, pain, depression, and when I could not pee on command, I had a urinary catheter put in, which was not pleasant. All of which can be normal due to having surgery. 4, soda, or we call it pop in Ohio. My weakness. I ended up getting really sick after 4 months of my surgery, and then one thing that helped settling my stomach down was ginger ale soda. I would take one sip at a time, about a half an ounce. And yes, I measured it. Well, since then, I've been drinking soda again. 5, I have gotten away from measuring my foods, portions, sizes, except for breakfast cereal. Then I measure it every time I eat it. 6, I have to constantly try to remember to chew my food, chew slowly, and not inhale my food. I have gone back to eating my food. I used to rush. I used to be more rushed instead of taking my time and slowly chewing. 7, weight gain. I have regained a lot of weight. This is to be expected 2 to 3 years after surgery, but I have gained over 40 pounds back. The biggest problems I've encountered is even though I have told most of my relatives about having the weight loss surgery, there are still a few that when they make food, they will do fried, loaded with condiments, greasy, unhealthy. My nephew and his wife, mom and dad, they also had this weight loss surgery. He and his wife do most of the cooking, but they still cook foods that are fried and greasy. The nephew's wife will say, oh, he can't have that, but when she makes it, my nephew eats it. Or he will make it and then he will eat it. And as for eating at a restaurant, I always let them know that I had weight loss surgery and I can only eat a little bit and I'll be taking the rest home or I'll be sharing it with my mom or dad. What I recommend to those who cannot have leftovers with them because they're traveling is ask the waiter for a smaller portion size and order from the children's menu. Another great technique for weight loss, even if you're not trying to have surgery, you could just ask for a children's portion. Did you know you can do that? It's way cheaper and you get way smaller amounts. I'm looking into joining a fitness center and yada, yada, yada. It goes on and on and on. Thank you for sharing. Regularly attending bariatric support groups may be beneficial as you will gain a lot of support and info. These are just comments from people about these videos. Someone else jumped on and said, you could fast and cut out a meal every now and then and reduce your weight. I think that's how most skinny people stay slim. Some days they don't get lunch or dinner for whatever reason. Anthony, stick with it. My mom had gastric surgery in 2009. Lots of ups and downs, weight fluctuating, but it's easier than to lose the 20 pounds and then fluctuate. So there's multiple comments. If you are interested, go into YouTube. You need to look at some of these. The number one thing this person reports, I had something called addiction. I wish I had known about it. It's called addiction transfer. When a food addict has their drug removed from them so suddenly, it becomes common for them to just become addicted to something else instead. Like shopping, gambling, drinking alcohol, etc. I was one of these. I'm doing much better now, but for almost a year, my life spun out of control. I give advice to anyone who has this or is planning to please take note of your habits. Make sure you aren't starting to transfer to something else that could end up harming you as much as your food addiction has. Here's another comment. 7 months out, my experience is completely different from you. I never felt nausea. I don't get dumping syndrome, and I don't get drunk faster at all. I experienced hunger right after. Another lady says, me too. I'm post-op. I've been hungry all day. Is there something wrong with me? I experienced nausea right after surgery. It's almost day 4. I'm afraid the sleep is not going to work for me. I do get hungry. People are saying all the time, nausea, hunger, disappointment. So the positives, of course, are people saying, well, I can hike for the first time. I can put on a bathing suit. I can get out of bed. I can walk up and down stairs. I can exercise. I can have a life. I feel better. I look better. People's entire lives are changed for the positive. But you've got to think about, is there another way for you to get there before going through all the risks of surgery? I wanted this for years. My doctors blew me off. They said, you're not that bad. You know, you can just lose the weight the other way. Some of these videos on YouTube say, well, you only need to be 10 to 20 pounds overweight. My doctor said, until you're 100 pounds overweight, we're not going to even talk. And I said, well, I am 100 pounds overweight according to one chart. They didn't want to hear it. They said, get out of here. So I'm doing my journey my way, but I wanted to bring this information to anybody out there who's kind of thinking about weight loss surgery. I highly recommend you go on YouTube. You look at all the different videos. You talk to people that have had it, and really talk to real people. Don't just read what the physician made. There's tons and tons of information, but do your research. Look at both sides of the story. Look at the risks, look at the benefits, and then weigh it out and make your own decision. Thanks for tuning in today, guys, and take care.